If your toddler only listens when you finally raise your voice or snap and you notice that works every single time, that's not random. And it's not because you weren't calm enough before. It means a pattern has already been built. Your toddler has learned exactly how long they can wait before you escalate. I have seen this with my own strong-willed boys, and I see this with parents every single week. So this video is about the pattern and what is creating it, and the one shift that starts to change it without becoming permissive and without becoming a person you're not. Why yelling works. Yelling does work. That is the uncomfortable truth. It works because it's intense, and intensity grabs attention. When you raise your voice, your child's nervous system shifts into survival mode. It's a biological response where the brain prioritizes safety, not learning, not reflection, not next time I'll listen sooner, just immediate compliance. That's why it feels effective after we've held being calm for so long. But here is the cost. The cost is that we are moving into the escalation loop. What is this? Parent asks, child delays, parent repeats, child pushes back, parent escalates, child complies. And the nervous system learns, wait for escalation, not listen to the first request. That is conditioning. It's not manipulation. It's not disrespect. It's pattern reinforcement. So we've just talked about how even if parents don't want to snap or yell, we can end up there and we can get stuck in an escalation loop. So I'm going to share a personal story to help you understand exactly how this happens and how we don't get stuck there. When my boys were 2.5, and deep in a throwing phase, I was hardly even snapping or yelling. But what was happening was this. I was trying calm. I was trying choices, trying to redirect my boys. I was trying anything online that said, this is the right way to parent your toddler and be a good parent. And when that still didn't work, I would leave the room they were in. I would go and shut the door, maybe sometimes slam it a little bit, and cry while toys were being thrown at the door from the other side. And I was wondering if maybe twin parenting didn't fit the standard parenting advice. Maybe it wasn't me failing, or maybe it was. I started to think that I had a discipline problem. But what I finally saw was this: we're stuck in a reactive loop. I wasn't just reacting to the moment. I was reacting to behavior. But behavior is not the first domino. It's the last one. As long as I tried to fix the behavior first, we were staying stuck in that loop. That's when I realized the question wasn't, how do I get them to comply? It was, what state is their nervous system in before I even ask? That was the shift. And this shift brings us to the parenting shift ladder. So when we shift from how do I stop the behavior to what state is their nervous system in, which is often the reason that they're not listening in the first place, and then the reason that we try to be calm, try all these failed parenting strategies, and then snap and yell or run away and slam the door, I want to show you this ladder. It has 5 rungs. On the very bottom is the most reactive parenting. On the very top is the most proactive parenting. And this ladder truly changes everything. The very bottom of the ladder is level 1, the first rung. That's reactive escalation. We're talking about why yelling works. Well, that's where it sits, level 1. So that could be snapping or yelling, but it also could be intensity-based threats that spike the nervous system. That's what gets movement. That's why it works. Level 2 is one rung above that. That's transactional parenting strategies, maybe like rewards and bribes and control-based threats. So those are threats that are demanding a certain outcome that try to control your child's behavior. And then one rung above that is relational guidance, collaboration. And this is where most parenting advice sits because it's very Instagrammable, but it's incomplete. And you're going to see why because of the next rung. Level 4, preventative structure. And then level 5, regulation first leadership. Now back to my story about the throwing to make sense of this ladder and how this helps you not get stuck in an escalation loop with your toddler and always stuck being that calm parent who ends up snapping. So when I realized we were stuck in a reactive loop with my toddlers throwing and ramming toys when they were 2.5, I did have to ask myself something uncomfortable. If yelling works for a lot of parents to get their kids to listen, and calm isn't working with my children, and many other parents are saying the same thing, what am I missing here? And here's exactly what I saw. There are levels how we respond. It's not you're a good parent or a bad parent. It's levels. And most of us don't even realize we're moving between different rungs of the parenting shift ladder, between all these different levels all day. I want to quickly go through the ladder with you one more time so you can truly understand how we can get out of reactive parenting and how we don't have to be stuck in that Instagrammable advice that always fails us, that leads us to snapping. When you're in level 1 at the bottom, reactive escalation strategies, parenting strategies, this is where the nervous system is already activated. So it doesn't have to be yelling though. It could be like the example I gave of shutting or slamming the door, storming off. That's walking away in overwhelm. Threatening, like if you do that, if you throw that toy, I'm throwing it in the trash. Raising your tone, even feeling just that spike inside your chest. You're not a bad parent. You're just stuck here. But we don't want to be stuck here, because we're training our children that listening and compliance only happens after intensity. And we're wiring in a waiting pattern for your child to listen. You're not wiring in a listening pattern, which makes them in survival state more often and dysregulated, and makes you more dysregulated, relying on strategies that escalate instead of create a healthy environment. And you might be here just because you're tired, because you tried so many things and they're not working. So if we go one rung up on the ladder, transactional based parenting strategies. If you do this, you get that. If you don't do this, you lose that. It's less intense, but it's behavior first. And then we have collaborative guidance. And this is where the story I was sharing, where I was stuck, because I was sharing how I was using all the best parenting advice on how to be a good parent and connect with your kids, right? And it felt like it was backfiring on me. This is where I was going from a level 3 right down to a level 1 and storming off and shutting the door and crying, right? As toys are getting chucked at the door, right? So collaboration can look like, let's do this together. You start, I'll help. Do you want to get in the stroller or hold my hand and walk? This reduces resistance for your child. But there's an important part here. If your child's nervous system is already dysregulated, collaboration isn't going to land. And that's exactly why I felt like I was failing at parenting when my kids were chucking toys and throwing them all over and slamming objects in all over my house. And if your toddler is struggling with choices and it makes their behavior worse or turns their not listening into a tantrum, you should listen to my video on why giving choices backfires when your toddler is upset. I'll link it up here for you. So that's what happened to me in that story I shared earlier. I thought I was using the right tools, but I was using them after escalation had already started. That's why redirection didn't work. It's not that redirection can't work, it's that it didn't work then. It wasn't the tool. It was the timing, because they were already in something I call sibling amplification. Two nervous systems amplifying each other, and they amplify each other's behavior. So if one child is throwing, then they're both throwing, and then the throwing becomes more amplified, and they do it more and more and more. And they had access to things that were fueling their dysregulation in their environment, slamming toys into the wall, throwing, feeding off of each other's energy. At that point, no perfect parenting advice on a sentence I could say to them fixes that. No perfect regulated, calm tone fixes that. The only thing that works in that particular moment is containment. And yes, sometimes that does mean removing the object, but that's not the bigger lesson here. Running around and trying to remove a bunch of objects when I'm outnumbered by my toddlers, that's not the lesson. The lesson is what I did afterwards. The shift wasn't better wording. The shift was better proactive structure. So that doesn't happen again. And I can contain the moment. And I don't go from trying to do perfect parenting to snapping or to running away and slamming the door. So when we use the level 4 of the ladder, of the parenting shift ladder, proactive structure, we are, instead of trying to stop the behavior, we stop saying, what's the perfect parenting tool that I could use in this moment? And we shift that to what conditions are creating this moment. And then we can put in those proactive structures to prevent it from happening in the first place. So that's less access to throwables, clear transitions, predictable routines, separating when amplification starts rising between siblings. Structure doesn't feel as exciting as collaboration. It's not as Instagrammable. It's more quiet, but it can be way more powerful because it prevents the spike and the cycle before it happens. And the very top is the regulation first leadership. I think of it like checking your child's state, like a thermometer. Are they frustrated? Do we need to pause? Do we need to make sure that they're going to receive what we are saying to them? Because teaching happens after regulation, not when your child is dysregulated or coming off of being dysregulated. And you don't have to be the perfect parent. Even if you move up just one rung, that makes a difference in your parenting. And when I said redirection didn't work for me, it isn't because collaboration with your child and those types of strategies don't work. It's because I was using it when everybody was already dysregulated. The timing was wrong. So parenting first leadership is, instead of asking, how do I get them to comply? You're asking, what state are we in right now? So at this point, you might be thinking, Heather, your parenting shift ladder is helpful. It explains why I snap. It explains why collaboration strategies sometimes feel like they backfire on me and they don't work. Now I don't feel alone, but that doesn't help my situation still. So I'm going to go over a few situations where you might be feeling like, hey, that's great to understand this, but this isn't helping my individual situation. So let's go through a few different situations here. You're feeding a baby and you can't intervene with your toddler not listening. So when you're feeding a baby and your toddler isn't listening, it's easy to be at the bottom of that parenting shift ladder. Level 1, using threats or snapping, or level 2, trying to control behavior based off of threats or bribing, because you don't have the bandwidth for collaboration in that moment, which means the real work for us is level 4 of the ladder: structure before the moment, clear transition warning, reducing access to certain things proactively, predictable routines. Maybe something is set up ahead of time. The ladder is telling you, don't try to jump to collaboration when structure hasn't been set, because you're going to feel like you're failing as a parent. Here's another situation that you might feel like doesn't apply. Your child is really stubborn and strong-willed. Strong-willed kids live in autonomy mode. When you escalate, they escalate harder. And that keeps you stuck at level 1. You end up snapping or having more severe threats to get them to comply and listen. And I actually have a closing story to end this video off with my strong-willed toddlers and how I can get stuck in level 2, control-based threats to get an outcome for my child's behavior. And I'm going to share how even me, who knows all of this, how that can happen and how I shift out of that. And I want you to realize that this parenting shift ladder shows you where you're stuck. It's not that your child's impossible. It's that a strategy may be mismatched for your child's temperament, because you might notice your child resist because saying no is like the best thing that they could do. They don't care about the candy. They don't care that you're going to take away the TV or the iPad, right? I'm talking strong-willed children here. Or if your child just says no, you're using the strategies. They're just saying no to everything. And you have the choice. You're kind of stuck at a fork here, right? 1, you could escalate by snapping or threatening to punish them in some kind of a way, which is level 1 rung on the ladder. You could threaten to control their behavior, which is level 2 of the ladder. You could argue with them, lecture them, and feel like you're fighting them, which is level 1 bottom rung of the ladder. But if you start to pause and think, where am I on the ladder here? Can you move up 1 rung? Maybe it's collaboration to turn that no into a yes. Maybe it's structure, so you don't even have to use scripts with them. Maybe it's parenting with leadership and regulation first, because that no is coming from distress of some type. Your toddler feels unsafe, uncomfortable, unsure. The ladder doesn't demand perfection. It demands awareness from you. Here's the last one where you feel like this just doesn't fit my situation, and it's gentle parenting is exhausting. This is a whole video I could make next time, so I'm not going to go all into it on this one. If gentle parenting feels exhausting, it's because you're living at level 3 on the ladder. You're collaborating constantly, but you haven't built level 4, that rung on the ladder yet, which is structure. When structure is strong, you don't have to collaborate every single moment. Things are already in place. The environment carries some of the weight, so you're not burning yourself out. And that's the difference between permissive and proactive parenting. Now, to close things off, the reason that most parents snap is because they want their child to listen. But instead, you're reinforcing an escalation loop and not a listening loop. If we want the listening loop, you as the parent need to set the structure. Your child then experiences predictability, regulation stays online, cooperation happens earlier, and you stay more steady. This is really big. Now, your child's dopamine is tied to competence instead of relief from threat. And as promised, I had one more story to end this off with, to anchor this into something real with the shift ladder. I'm actually a pretty calm person by temperament. I don't really yell. I've snapped maybe a handful of times at my children. But even then, I struggle. And this is exactly why. I have two strong-willed boys that amplify each other's behavior. If one gets an idea to push back directions or instructions from me, they piggyback and they both do it. I had a moment where they both ran into the backyard and declared they were not going to preschool. Like they outright refused. And here's another layer. I'm a single mom who carries the weight of having them most of the time. There isn't another adult standing there to reinforce what I'm saying. It's just me solo. So when two strong-willed kids start escalating together, I'm outnumbered. And it's very tempting for me to reach towards control-based threats to control their behavior. It's not because I'm angry. It's because I need it for them to stop doing that, right? We need to function as a family. And when you use control-based threats, which is level 2 on the parenting shift ladder, you can actually be calm. It's a misconception that all threats are that you're super dysregulated and yelling, right? So even if I'm calm on the outside, if I move into control-based threats, I'm still moving down the ladder towards the bottom. And this isn't about personality. It's about a system. Calm tone alone doesn't prevent escalation cycles. This story shows that exactly. How even though I was saying it calm, hey, if you don't listen, you're going to lose TV later. If you don't do this, this is happening. Calm tone alone doesn't prevent the escalation pattern. Structure does. And when I built structure, everything shifted. Not perfectly, but predictably. If this changed how you see yelling, why your child doesn't listen, and even how calm collaborative parenting isn't enough alone. Subscribe for more nervous system parenting strategies. And if power struggles keep repeating, watch my next video on how I break down the power struggle loop. All right, parents, I'll see you in the next video.